Yeah, I've been hearing you. It's just, it's taken me a while to finally get to the Star Force games, just because, man, these games are expensive. I can't really say that I never heard of the Star Force games, at least prior to recent years. I do somewhat acknowledging their existence back when, around roughly the time that they were released. It's just the thing is, though, is that around 2007, 2008, with the first two games, I didn't have a whole lot of money in my family, so I had to really prioritize what specific game I really wanted to get and try to get the most out of that. And I remember really it only being like Pokemon and Zelda and Mario for the most part, just because those were safe games for me to play because I know I would get the most out of them. And then around 2009, when it came to 3, I actually don't remember that one being released, to be honest. I always thought that was the one that got canceled. It ended up being 4 that was actually canceled worldwide. But I do remember that around that time, kind of the same reason for the first two. It's just that instead of Mario and Pokemon, it's probably something like Call of Duty, because that was what all my friends were playing at the time. And that's when I was starting to really get into online gaming at the time. But I mean, man, looking back in hindsight now, I really wish that I would have gone out of my way to pick some of these games up, knowing the way that I am now at this day and age. Because, man, these things were not cheap to have. But as a person that prefers physical collecting, this would have ended up having to become a necessity at some point. But I digress. I now have in my hands the successor series to one of the games I played the most as a kid in the Megaman Star Force games. So, I felt like it was appropriate to finally take a look at the series, starting with the first one. But before I do that, real quick, I just want to get out of the way just some criminal activity that I might actually be doing in terms of this video. If you want to skip to the start of the video, just click to this point here. I just wanted to sidetrack real quick. I'm not going to try to ramble too much about my opinions on downloading ROMs. So that's basically the reason why I've not really done a Star Force review yet, is because I'm not a big fan of downloading ROMs. Not necessarily because it's just, oh, it's criminal, don't do it. It kind of is, and that alone kind of keeps me from trying to do it very often. But there are mental workarounds to it that I don't mind using. But at the same time, I'm also a little sketched out by it. I've tried to maintain just as clean of a computer as I possibly could. I tried to avoid downloading stuff that could potentially like put viruses on my computer and whatever. I know I'm saying that, and it's basically just like I got virus software to block stuff like that, and it's generally become much safer to do it now anyways than any other time. But I get a little bit weary of that kind of stuff. My PC's not exactly the most high grade, and I want to try to get the most out of it as long as I can, because I don't have money to throw around, per se, despite buying these. But also at the same time, my mental workaround, I was saying, sort of comes in the part that if it's not possible to actually physically play a game due to various reasonings, so in this sense, like, if it's a Japanese-only game, but there's finally like an English translation online that you can play, but you can't actually play the proper released game, I'm okay with that, I guess. Some ROM hacks, although are kind of not legal per se, some of them could be interesting to see, and I wouldn't mind trying some of those someday, especially as long as I actually own a physical game, which goes back to the main point in that if it's at all possible, I want to try to at least own the physical release of the game, just to at least somewhat justify that, hey, I acknowledge that there are the company's own property here, and that the ROM is technically not right, but it's the only way for me to record the footage that I need in order to do my review that is technically legal under copyright and all that stuff. There's also a tangential argument you can make that, you could just buy like the recording software for your DS and whatever. And my argument against that is that a lot of the ones I find online are either stupid expensive and or require tinkering of the device in hand in order to actually record the footage per se, which in of itself, while not illegal, tends to be something against company policies per se. You know, you're not really supposed to like screw into your Nintendo DS because then that kills warranty and all that stuff. Not that warranty really matters by this point because the DS is ancient in comparison to everything else. So that's kind of like it's like a pick your poison type of thing with my mentality to this. But as long as I was able to physically own a game, then I would feel better about downloading a ROM. And that's the point I kind of wanted to make. I hope I didn't ramble too much about it. I probably did. But hey, with all that said, whatever. We're finally here to play the Megaman Star Force games, starting with Star Force Leo. I didn't know that there was actually 3 versions for the first game in the series, which I thought was a little weird, but anyways, regardless, why don't we take a look and see what this thing is all about. So, Megaman Star Force takes place about 200 years after the Battle Network series. While the internet does still sort of exist, technology has evolved into the use of electromagnetic waves to send info, make calls, or to utilize cards to activate certain appliances or services. Navis still exist, but are more or less relegated to said cards to act as the sort of mascot for the function at hand, with many people having multiples of the same type. Not everyone just has one singular Navi for themselves. Every person is also equipped with a transer to utilize all the functions in question, with some sort of card reader installed to use. More or less, the transers are all people need, while everything else kind of operates from the cloud, or more primitively, radio waves. Amongst all the researchers of this time, they've managed to discover alien life from a planet called FM. They attempted to send a crew there to form a brother band with them to exchange friendly relations. You're going to see brother band or brothers referenced a lot. Think of it as mostly just a word swap for friendship or friend. There never really felt like a need to change the term other than to try and make it sound cooler, I guess. With that said, the crew of the space colony known as Peace were lost in space, with the crew declared more or less to be dead. 3 years since then, you star as one of the children of the crew, a young boy you can name. Nah, this is Geostellar, and he's basically been a recluse since the loss of his father. A former colleague of your dad named Mr. Boreal drops by the house to see how everyone's doing. Mom's doing her best, but Geo is still very visibly deterred and separated from society. Boreal gives Geo a visualizer, an old device from Geo's dad's collection. Geo embraces it and then leaves. Every night, Geo goes to Vista Point to look out to the stars. A few things he finds passion in. Before reaching, though, he's accosted by the class president of the school, Luna Platts, and her bros for not showing up to school. Geo blows them off and keeps going. That night, Geo's there enjoying the stars when, all of a sudden, an alien life form appears and seemingly possesses Geo. He can only see him with the visualizer on, though, along with what appears to be a whole road-like system above them. The alien notes the loneliness in Geo's heart and decides to latch on, introducing himself as omega-xis? I want to say it's like omega-axis, because that kind of sounds cool. But omega-x seems like the right way, but that doesn't matter. Anyways, he calls himself Mega, as apparently that's what everyone just calls him. Okay. Some other aliens from the same place Mega came from, Planet FM, have managed to catch up though, and Omega teaches Geo how to pulse into the wave world above the regular world, apparently requiring a whole Power Rangers-esque transformation technique to do so. EM wave change, Geostellar on the air. Mega needs a human host in order to gain the powers on the planet though. However, Geo seems extremely reluctant to go through with running around a whole other dimension battling viruses and whatever else may come for them. But Mega seemingly knows something about Geo's father, so Geo keeps Mega around in exchange for info on his dad. And from there, a bond is born as wacky shenanigans ensue. Geo and Mega must do what they can to repel the invading alien forces to keep the world safe. Now, don't misunderstand me here. What I just explained is essentially the main story being told, and at its core, it is a similar form of storytelling as some of the better Battle Network games. But Star Force does do a few things that I feel are much more unique in its storytelling compared to the Battle Network games. Firstly, Geo is a much more compelling and deep main character. If there was one quote that came to mind that basically explained Geo, it would be,
"I never asked for this."
He's not the immediate all-courageous badass like Land before. He's just a kid dealing with some personal struggles, really only going along with this alien's plans because it might lead to some small hope that it might bring his father back. The reason he goes out every night to look at the sky is so he might actually see his father in heaven, and that's actually scarily accurate depiction of childhood innocence leading to depressing results. Geo would have been like 7 when his father was lost, so the idea of death was probably never really explained to him fully, so now he's got this adolescent view on life and death, so all he's got to work with is maybe I can see him? But for 3 years, that's gotta weigh anyone down. And now that Geo's all but lost the person he's held most dear, he can't bring himself to bond with anyone, lest he loses them too. It's kind of heart-wrenching and made Geo a much more interesting character immediately compared to the mostly aloof, thick-headed Lan from the Battle Network series. Speaking of loss, the other thing Star Force does really well with its storytelling is having a poignant theme mixed in with its Saturday morning cartoon layout with its narrative. In this game's case, following along with Geo's sense of loss, loneliness and how people cope with it is the major theme at hand here. Each major villain takes over a person who's suffering in some form or fashion, and by interacting with them all, it causes Geo to rethink his outlook on life and bonding with others, and develops because of it. Although implemented very simplistically here, I really feel like there's an interesting narrative here for both kids and adults to latch onto, and that's something I can very much respect. Can't say the same for the music though. The main theme does kind of give off this sort of starry-eyed optimistic feel, which sort of fits with the space theme that comes up a lot, but the problem comes in the lack of depth to the themes. They feel like they loop after only 30 seconds, making them feel like they can't fully go into any proper chorus or interesting verse. Though I can't chalk it up too hard because Battle Network pretty much did the same thing. Graphics are basically the same as Battle Network 4 through 6. It does feel like the human characters are being given more detail to their designs, but otherwise remain largely the same. In terms of the wave designs, I think I prefer the more sleek Navi designs over the extraterrestrial ghost designs of omega-xis and company. The theming seems to be inspired off of Megaman X more than OG Mega Man this go around, which might explain the more extravagant designs to them. Mega Man's design is almost cool, but Omega's head acting as the Buster just doesn't do it for me though. Alright, before I can go on, I guess I might as well talk about the combat. So Star Force takes the Battle Network formula and brings it into the third dimension. Battles take place on a 5x3 grid space with you occupying a single row of 3 squares. Moving left or right to dodge attacks, you can also counter with a Mega Buster, either by holding down the button for a rapid fire buster, or by letting it charge on its own to deal times 10 the damage with a charge shot. The Buster's pretty cool in this game. There's definite times that a charge shot and the rapid fire version can be really helpful, even at its earliest state. I always really enjoyed it. You can also further upgrade the Buster by actually equipping weapons. A first in the series, these affect the power, rapid, and charge stats that we've been used to before. Some weapons can even have special properties to them, like confusing enemies when landing a charge shot, or giving out Zenny exclusively after battles. I didn't really bother with the more unique ones though, personally. Early on, I ended up finding a weapon that increased both the power and charge by 2 points, a significant upgrade to the original weapon, especially at that point in the game, and was the weapon I used for the rest of the adventure. Sure, some gimmicks of the other busters were neat in concept, but it was nothing I couldn't cover with my cards. Chips from the Battle Network series return in the form of these cards, along with a new rule set for picking them. Every time you go to the custom screen, 6 cards are placed in at random. You can pick a card to then take into battle. You can take more though if you pick cards of either the same type, or if you pick cards that are in the same column. White cards act as wild cards and can always be picked. White cards usually come in the form of enhancement chips, but can be manipulated by you by selecting 6 cards and favoring them in the menu. Doing so will make them wild cards. In essence, that means leaving the custom screen, you'll usually always have at least 2 cards to pick from. Using the cards is the same, pressing A whenever to use them, but you're locked to one row and enemies can be so far away that would make close range cards like swords useless, right? Well, not with the lock-on mechanic it won't. Pressing down will engage the lock-on function, and if an enemy lines up dead ahead or at a 45-degree angle, Mega Man will teleport in position and use the attack, making range a near non-issue. I say near because you are still physically moving to the space, so contact damage is still a thing. You don't really teleport to the spot as much as you move through the squares into position, so you can't dodge attacks like that, and there's always a bit of a delay from the time you hit the button to when you get to the position and use the move. So in the case of something long range, you should still try to use it without the lock-on to avoid whiffing. So it's not overpowered, but gives staple attacks consistent with the series some purpose. The other thing you're capable of from the start is blocking. You only have 3 spaces to maneuver, so enemy attack patterns had to be adjusted a fair bit. Many attacks will usually only attack you where you're at, requiring you to just side shift to avoid damage. Obviously that'd be boring if that was the only thing you needed to do. So some attacks, as well as in the event that you get ganged up, means that there are some moves that are just not safe to dodge. In that case, you can actually block attacks to avoid damage, plain and simple. My biggest issue with blocking though is that there's always just a huge delay from the time the shield dissipates to when you get full control again, meaning you are very much open to damage after blocking, which blows. I said that if you're skilled enough, you could feasibly beat a Battle Network game without taking damage, but I can't see that with Star Force, especially when running from battles feels a bit borked since it failed on more than one occasion on low-leveled enemies. Now, I did mention the weapons you can equip to augment Mega Man's damage, but that's not the only thing you can use to change your abilities. Sort of. As per story reasoning, brother bands can be formed, and by doing so will give Mega Man the abilities normally found within the Battle Network Navi customizer, since nothing of the sort exists here. Forming brother bands, though, feels like a wireless-only function, as you can link with friends to form the bonds. You do form some story-based ones as you play, but you only really get to use like 2 for the better part of the game, with a third coming damn near at the final section. With the brother band formed, you get access to a couple abilities, as well as adding their favorite chips into your folder as an extra randomized white chip to pick from. Later on, you get instilled the power to use the titular Star Force ability. It mostly acts like the style change from Battle Network 2 and 3, but with one big twist. It's not just an ability that's toggled on or off from the overworld menu. It too becomes a card that you have to use in battle. Through online functions, I believe there's a way to get the Star Forces from other games as well, but as it stands, I believe you only get access to your game's exclusive one only. So in my case, using the Leo Star Force gives Mega Man the fire element and a burner type charge shot for big damage. You can also select chips on a horizontal line as well for more chip matching variety. Countering also gives him an exclusive skill. Countering returns from the Battle Network games, but is different here since there's no emotion gauge like with Battle Network 4 and 6. If you hit an enemy with a card while they're attacking, they will be stunned for a brief moment as per usual, and it will reward you with a random card from your deck to use right away. While in Star Force, it instead grants access to a unique skill that does a good amount of damage. It's a fine setup, and the Star Force variant can be linked multiple times, doing that extra damage if you're good. But I sort of prefer using full synchro and trying to string together consecutive uses of it. The final noteworthy-ish thing to mention is best combos. Program advances aren't achievable in Star Force 1, but later in the game you can perform best combos. Essentially, against boss-type characters in the overworld, if you string together at least 3 cards totaling at least 300 points of damage, the score is tracked. Not really much else to say from there. However, you can find this guy late in the game that for 3000 Zenny will actually make a one-time use card that has the whole damage in one go, freezing time while it does the whole thing, which could be pretty broken if set up properly. Or you could just absolutely whiff it when the boss is unhittable. Great.
Boo! You stink!
Exploring a wave world can be a bit of a chore compared to the web from Battle Network. There is no interconnected space in the wave world to link the different sections together, so if you want to go to a certain comp space, you have to drive to that spot, find the 1 or maybe 2 accessible wave holes kicking around that'll even let you go to the wave world as is, then maneuver your way all throughout there, having to be forced into lining up into a specific spot to even access the hidden comp space or other locales. And even then, you'll be forced to examine everything to even find most access points to explore in the first place as a human. I know some people didn't really like the internet from the Battle Network games, but I didn't mind them. And in this case, Star Force's version of it, not all that great. The dungeons, however, are some of the funnest in the series. Pretty much all have some sort of gimmick using the touchscreen, but they're fairly enjoyable to some degree and never overstay their welcome. And that culminates to a really fun final dungeon where you have to yeet yourself across the area to get a good read of this constellation map so you can perform a connect the dots at the end. And that's all I can really say for now. Star Force 1 does unfortunately have the problem of being the successor to the Battle Network games. In my opinion, I feel like I do prefer the Battle Network's version on the combat. It just felt like the strategy and the gameplay, selecting the chips and all these different things, I felt like that was more interesting than what Star Force tried to do with its version of the combat. I know they are technically different, but I feel like there's enough similarities that it's hard to, not make the comparison throughout it. But in a vacuum, it's really not all that bad. With a few little tweaks here and there, I think it could be fully realized, and that's something that you could see later on in the series. Who knows? So yeah, who knows? Maybe the combat will get really good on its own, and in that sense, I'll finally enjoy it. But no vacuum is necessary in order to enjoy the story and the characters that are written in this thing. It is so well done and far exceeds anything that I played in the Battle Network games, aside from maybe that one part in Battle Network 3. This whole thing was such an interesting story to tell, and that alone makes this thing a must-play, and I cannot wait to see what the rest of the series does with its storytelling. But anywho, thank you all so much for watching. Like what you saw, you can click right up there to check out some of my other videos that I've done. Or, if you really feel like it, you can click right up there to subscribe. And in case you really feel like it as well, you can follow my link down below for my Twitter and follow me there. I know I don't post a whole lot, but I've been trying. And just another place that you can check out some of my stuff. So, until next time, guys, I will see you all later.